and welcome to the Sunny 16 podcast. My name is Aid, and I am one of the Sunny 16 extended family here for your delectation and delight this week. It is a joy to hang out in a really big group, even if we only get to do that, over the phone, as it were. Is it a phone? Internet, whatever. Anyway. There'll be a conversation about photography, I expect, at some point, but it might just be a chat, and we'll see how it goes. Anyway, first, who have we got with us this week? Drum roll, please. Oh, it's the delightful Claire and the almost as delightful Graham.
I would say more delightful Graham, but I'm in the minority of one.
Okay, well, let's just say Claire's better lit then, shall we? And go with that. so like you're both equally delightful, both equally beautiful, but Claire is definitely better lit.
Yeah, we should mention it actually at this point, given how beautifully lit we both are, that this is a video podcast this week, so people can go to YouTube and see us, see all of our lovely, lovely, well-lit faces. We're all doing better with the lighting this week, I feel. Even me, marginally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good, and of course, we've got our talented producer in the background as well, for those that get to go and look at the video and see just how it is. Oh, he snuck onto the screen. He's sneaking in. Oh, now he's gone again.
Yeah, producer John is going to be throwing us off our game all evening.
Yeah, but that's okay. I'm loving the whole shuffling Polaroid squares around thing, which it works so well on video, probably less well on the audio, but never mind. Anyway, it isn't just the three of us this week, is it? With John in the background doing the tricks, because we have two super special guests, and this is what I meant by the extended family, because we have. And Graham has really spoiled the first syllable in each of their names, but I'm going to try and get it the right way around. We have Jeff and Gabe from iDream of Cameras. Hey guys.
Hey guys.
Hello.
How's everyone doing?
Yeah, well, good. It's good to finally meet you, and to be able to chat and put a face to the voice. Fantastic.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I've been trying to decide, is iDream of Cameras, is it the Fraser or is it the Joey? Which one of these two is it? Because one of those seems less compliment than the other.
Yeah, that all depends on whether we get our back nine pickup or not.
We're very nervous about this, but hopefully it'll happen.
I just assumed it was a reference to I Dream of Jeannie, but there you go.
You know, I pitched the working title Two Jews with Extra Money, but then Gabe vetoed it.
So funny.
So there came iDream of Cameras. That was our second choice.
I think how great the t-shirts would be if you had gone
exactly.
with...
Yeah. Those would be selling off the shelves.
Yeah. Sometimes it pays to sleep on it overnight, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. We were just about to press the button, and then held back and said, "Let's sleep on this."
Yeah, you could have had a lot of remainders out of that stock, couldn't you?
Yes.
Everybody who's listening to this, I would imagine, has probably heard you guys already, because we've shared, I think, 2 of your shows on the Sunny 16 feed, and you're up to show number. Which one did we just put out? Was it show number 5? Or was it 5 that's coming out? So 4 went out too. So there's 5 coming out this week. This is thing they're coming so thick and fast. I'm still going to keep.
Yeah, 6 is already in the can. I think you have, right?
Yeah.
So show number 5 is coming out this week. So the last 3 have all been. Or will be all be on the Sunny 16 Presents feed. So hopefully everyone has listened and is up to speed on where you are and who you are. But it's probably a good idea, just in case someone's been living under a rock, to give us a quick précis as to who you both are and what iDream of Cameras is. Go on, Jeff, you go first.
Okay. Well, my name's Jeff Greenstein. I'm a television writer based in Los Angeles. And Friends, Will and Grace, Desperate Housewives. Those are the ones people seem to want to talk about the most. There are others that people don't like to talk about. We'll skip them. Gabe is a longtime acquaintance. We have become closer friends in the past year. We have discovered our mutual love of film cameras, and I kind of roped him into doing this, knowing that he was equally devoted to film cameras. Gabe, you take it. You introduce yourself.
My name's Gabe Sachs. I am also a writer-producer. Freaks and Geeks, Night Shift, Diary of Wimpy Kid Movies, 90210, boy, and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I have been a camera geek for a very, very long time, and it's distressed a lot of people, and I needed to find someone that would talk to me and be my therapist through all of it. And luckily, we found each other. So Jeff has helped me with my addiction, and it's just getting worse and worse.
I was going to say, you say helped you with your addiction. Helped how exactly? Because it seems more to me that you two are actively feeding each other's passion. Because one of you go, look at this camera that I've got, isn't this fabulous?
Yeah.
And the other will go, I don't have one of those.
Well, yeah, the problem is that Jeff has cameras that I don't have, so I'm always going, wow, that is the coolest looking camera. And what frustrates me sometimes is Jeff will have a camera that is just the most beautiful thing in the world, and I'll go, I have to get the camera, and then he said it's really terrible. It's like one of those cameras. It's all this. The pictures are terrible, but it is the most beautiful camera ever. So,
we are each other's best enablers. That's what
Yes.
I've learned in the time we've been doing this, because I can't tell you, first of all, Gabe's available via text seemingly at all hours. I don't know how he makes that work. I may be talking with a chat bot half the time,
Right.
but I will text him and I'll send him a link to an eBay auction, and I'll say, should I do it? And the answer is always yes. Yes.
Always yes.
So,
It's always yes.
So in the time that we've been doing this, I think I can place 3 separate purchases at the feet of Gabe Sachs. They would not have happened had I not spoken to him.
That's what I'm here for.
I don't think that sounds good. You've got sometimes you've got to just go with it, haven't you? I mean, I don't know if either of you have dropped into the Sunny 16 Discord this week, but there was an article on the BBC News about an old fellow who unfortunately passed away, but he had a collection of over 3,000 cameras, and he'd had to buy where he lived, a small town, I think in somewhere in Scotland. He'd had to buy the local Salvation Army Hall to house his collection.
Okay, that's unbelievable. That's amazing, right?
It sounds great until you realize that he actually died from an avalanche of cameras falling on him. Right now it's a sad story.
Now it's just a disaster. Now it's a disaster.
With your stuff, like I think I heard the expression. I think it was John Hodgman on this podcast I listened to a long time ago, and he was discussing that the difference between a collector and a hoarder is whether or not you have stuff on display. So you guys, I mean, we can kind of see behind you. You both seem to have quite a lot of stuff on display. Are you pretty good about showing your stuff off?
Well, I would say I'm a colorder. I would say I'm really a combination of a collector and a hoarder. When someone asks me, isn't that a lot of cameras? I go, I am a collector, but it's obviously there's a lot of stuff here. There's a lot of
incriminating evidence going up on the video at the moment.
Yeah, it is a fine line. Most of those are Jeff's, but yes, it's a fine line between collecting and hoarding. But I think the ones that are I realized I'm a collector is when they are on display, and the ones that are in boxes, reveal that I truly am a hoarder. So it's a combination of both. Jeff?
Yeah, I everything I have is out. That picture that it just went up, actually. When you walk in the front door of my house, about 10 feet to the left is that shelf with all my cameras on it. And I like having them out. Gabe and I discussed in a recent episode how long it takes us to get out the door, trying to figure out which cameras to grab before we leave the house. But I like them as mechanical objects. I just think they're beautiful. And so I think I was influenced. I once was, when we were doing Will and Grace, we were invited to a party at the apartment of a New York photographer, and he had this glass case with all of his beautiful cameras in it, and they were all weathered in exactly the right way. And it was this like focus of attention that not only like what he did for a living, but his love of his tools. And I thought it was kind of great. So I think I'm similarly a collector / hoarder, but I'm really rigorous about making sure everything is out and I want to use it. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on the podcast is I think I am more devoted to things being beautiful, and Gabe is more devoted to things being utilitarian. He's much more about like, does it work?
Yeah.
That said, is from listening to you guys, you seem better, Jeff, about going, yeah, this camera's not working, get rid of it. Whereas Gabe, you seem to have a history of going, well, I'm going to put this in a box and forget about it, and maybe I'll love it.
Absolutely.
Which
Maybe I'll love it later. You're absolutely right. It's like I put it away. I go, oh, I've had such a bad experience with this. And instead of doing what a normal person would do and go, it's time to get rid of this and say goodbye and say thank you for whatever you've given me, and then putting it out in the world, I have to put it somewhere else. And hopefully one day I will fall in love with it again. And this is something that Jeff is much better at doing than I am. I really would love to be able to thin out and just have the cameras that I use all the time, but I don't see that happening very soon, sadly.
Well, if you enjoy it, that's okay. Isn't it? Yeah, there's no problem with that. It's the two things, the photography and cameras, are different hobbies. As our friend Hamish says, he has two hobbies. He has cameras and he has photography, and that's okay, right? As long as the two get along, as long as the two hobbies get along side by side, that's brilliant, because then you got two hobbies, right?
Right, exactly. I think the problem is the searching, that always thinking there's another camera that I need to experience. But I guess that's why we're doing a podcast, is because there is always one more camera or one more lens that I don't know about, and I'm learning about, from a podcast or, a website that I just want to try out and see what it's like. So I'm always hunting.
That's interesting, because you've called your website and your podcast "I Dream of Cameras." Is it the cameras rather than the lenses then?
Oh, I think it's a combo. I really think. I mean, because sadly,
all the cameras
we
now,
really
so now it has to be lenses.
we really do dream of cameras. And there's always cameras I'm seeing that I know nothing about, and Jeff has cameras that I'm learning about that I have not used. So it's always, it feels like the right name for what we're doing.
Yeah. Gabe spoke in a recent episode about the Noctilux, which is a lens I don't have, but a really exotic, super fast, super expensive Leica lens that gives a particular quality, particularly to like portraits, this really shallow plane of focus. So you get this lovely kind of softness beyond the subject and stuff. And so, yes, we do dream of lenses too. But I think one thing we've started to sort of interrogate in the show is the way that the different tools unlock different parts of you artistically. I love what Claire does with Polaroids. I just think that work is amazing, and it's restricted in some way by what you can accomplish with a Polaroid, and I think those restrictions are interesting. For me, I just got a wide lux. I had always wanted one of these. It's a panoramic swing lens camera that shoots an image with a moving lens that spans 126 degrees during the exposure, which is something you can't really replicate with any other sort of still camera. I guess you can sort of do it with your iPhone, but the images that I'm getting out of it are really interesting. And it unlocks something different than what I get from an Olympus OM1 or a Nikon F or a Rolleiflex or something.
I can totally get that. Out of shot here on the wall in my study is my favorite photograph of our wedding, and that was shot on a wide lux. A friend of mine has one, and we were outdoors and by a river, and there's just this amazing shot. And actually, my wife and I, we're tiny little stick figures in the corner of this amazing landscape shot, but it's so captured the whole thing for me, and it's an amazing. So the wide lux thing, I totally get that. Yeah.
Obviously, we could talk a great deal about gear, but you guys have got a great podcast, so people should go and listen to I Dream of Cameras to hear you talking all about that stuff. If you haven't already, then just make sure you're going and checking them out. They're out every 2 weeks at the moment. This is fantastic. I sincerely hope that Hollywood never kicks back into gear, because that's really going to mess up your important podcast schedule. But there's some other things that I thought I would really like to, because you guys are ideally placed to ask about certain things. And one of the subjects that I thought would be good to talk about is something that we talked to actually Anil about. Anil and Stephen about, I guess, a couple of years ago, was about the trend of celebrities and film cameras. And before we started recording, you were talking about, was it Ryan Johnson? Who was it you were talking about?
Ryan Johnson.
It was Ryan Johnson. Oh, thank goodness. Who shoots film and has shot for a long time, is very into it. And so there obviously are people out there in your industry that are very passionate about it. But we have seen a lot over the last few years of people pictured on Instagram with their film cameras and their Leicas and stuff like this. And it has an impact on all of our hobby, for one thing. So, I mean, is it a fad? Is or who are the genuine shooters, I suppose, and who are the ones who are just doing it for Instagram likes?
Well, I think there's a lot of luck when I guess it was the Kardashians with the Contax T2, and then those prices blew up, and then people were with the Yashica T4, and those prices blew up. But I think there's a genuine interest in photography from people who want to slow things down and take their time and really care about pictures, because everyone has a phone, so everyone's a photographer. Everyone's just shooting. They're taking a million pictures a day. They're taking a million selfies. And then when you put a film camera in their hands, it becomes a different thing. It's a different process. They get to develop the film or send their film in, and then they see how it comes out. And I think that interest is really spreading. I think people are really getting interested again in film cameras, and I think that's why the demand is there, and people want to shoot as much as possible. I think it's a really interesting thing, because a lot of actors on sets will see me with the film camera, and some of them are going, "Can I see the picture right after?" And I'm going, "No, it's a film camera." And so they become interested, and I think there's a lot of great actors and directors that are really amazing photographers. So it's fun to see that.
I suppose it's creative people, isn't it, that you're working with, and so the desire to be creative, and when they see that going on, it's quite appealing. Have you introduced many people to it yourselves?
Oh yeah,
Gabe for sure.
I have gotten people addicted. So there's a photographer, Chris Lowell. First of all, he's a great actor. He's in a ton of shows. But Chris Lowell was in a show we did, Life as We Know It, which we shot in Vancouver, Canada. And I put an old beat up Leica M4 around his neck for the character, which I'm always trying to do. Every character, I'm trying to figure it out. And so I put some film in it, and I said, just shoot as much as you want. Just keep shooting and learning it. And this is what this kid's character, he's fascinated with photography. And so he shot and shot and shot and never stopped. And he had a show with David LaChapelle. I mean, he's a major, unbelievable photographer. If you see his work, it's under Chris Lowell, I think, on Instagram, Mr. Chris Lowell. So talented. And that's someone who stayed with it. Tristan Wilds, who was in the show The Wire, and we put him in 90210. Yesterday, he posted himself with a film camera, and he said to me, "See what happens? It's I'm always handing the camera to someone and letting them feel, and see what it's like and take pictures. So I enjoy passing it on to as many people as I can."
Have you been guilty of the same thing, Jeff?
Oh, yes. I mean, one of the ways you mentioned earlier that I might be a little more adept at offloading gear than Gabe is. Well, one of the ways in which I offload gear is I give film cameras as gifts quite a lot. If I've lost interest in a camera, here is a very convenient way to pass it on to somebody else. And so I give particularly like little rangefinder cameras. They're so easy to learn.
Yeah.
I gave a friend a Canon G3 QL17, which is just if you want to learn film photography, there are few better cameras than that, because you can toss it in a jeans pocket or a purse or whatever. It's always with you. And sometimes it sticks and sometimes it doesn't. I was at a friend's house recently. I had given him an Olympus 35 RC as a gift. And he's like, "Oh, let me go get it." And it clearly had been sitting on the garage, like next to like the motor oil, and the discarded plumbing equipment. But that's okay. That's fine. That's fine, as long as he kept it. So yeah, I try and like pass it along as well. I find that Polaroid cameras tend to be stickier. I think people appreciate that there is a physical object that comes out of the camera. It's a little different than film photography, because I think a lot of film photographers, they just send the film in and they get the image scanned, and then they get back what is effectively a digital photograph. But with a Polaroid, a physical object comes into your hand, and you put it on your fridge, or you give it to the person who's in it. And we all have been talking over the last several years about the revenge of analog. There's even a wonderful book called Revenge of Analog. Gabe is also very into typewriters. There's vinyl records, board games, like these tactile things that we're drawn to in a world that feels increasingly digitized and ephemeral. And so I feel like film photography is part of that.
And the Polaroid thing, it's really interesting you said that, because Martin Starr, I don't know if you guys know, he was in Freaks and
Great.
Geeks. He plays Bill, but he's also was in Silicon Valley and some other things. Is Martin and I went to some event and he had his little Polaroid 600 with him and just loves it. I mean, it's just people love, he loves taking portraits of friends and then handing them the picture. And, he's gotten more and more into it. So I love when I see that. I love when people are, because people really are fascinated with, oh, they still make film for that? You always get that question. And they're just like, that camera still works. And, it's so foreign to most people. So I love going out there and shooting and showing people.
I always think the whole instant film thing is a real challenge to give away the photograph. It's like it's one of a kind,
Yes.
and you give it away.
Right.
And you know what? Certainly never does my photography give so much joy to people as when you give them an instant shot. And they say, "Do I have to shake it?" No, don't shake it. It's like, damn song.
Right.
And that is the most joy I've ever given in photography. Certainly, it's a fantastic thing to be able to do.
So I'm interested by the kind of work that you guys both like to produce, photography wise. And you're both writers and producers. But where does your photography take you? What kind of stuff are you mostly shooting? Because I probably see more of your stuff, Jeff, than yours, Gabe. And you do a lot of landscape, a lot of where you're going and traveling, and it's a real mixture of stuff like that. Is that what primarily attracts you?
Yeah, I mean, what got me back into film photography was portraits of my family. When my son was born 23 years ago, I suddenly had a very interesting subject, even more interesting than the West Highland Terrier that I had at the time. And so I would take pictures of my then wife and our son and so forth. So that kind of engendered wanting to get film cameras and get back into photography. So it started with people, but it also is a spur to travel and exploration. I mean, for me, I do a lot of cycling around Los Angeles. I have a Brompton folding bike that I throw in the back of my car, and I go to some bike path and I have something new to photograph and some new landscape. One of the advantages of living in Los Angeles is there are so many different landscapes crammed into a relatively small area. You can be at a snow-capped mountain or a sandy beach, a 45-minute drive in either direction. And so there's a lot to see and a lot to explore, interesting landmarks. And I think that's what stimulates me. I do, and this is where I'm going to throw it to Gabe in a minute. I do some on-set photography. I like having an Olympus Pen half-frame camera in my back pocket when I'm on set. And so I shoot a lot of black and white candids when I'm blocking out a scene or between takes at the craft services table. I like doing that too. But I think it's the spur to see different things, be more visually aware, be more aware of my surroundings and so forth. That's kind of what spurs me.
I think what started for me is sort of, on the first sets, I had just traded all of my Canon film equipment to be able to get just the body of the Leica M6. And I scraped everything I had together to get that. And then I traded some other stuff to get the lens. And I think on the set of Freaks and Geeks, where everything sort of opened up, I just sort of shot in between takes, and I shot as much stuff as possible on set, and my stuff was mostly focused on portraiture. So, I'm always shooting friends or friends of friends, and that's really what I enjoy doing. And I love the process of film, obviously, and trying different cameras. But I think that's what satisfies me the most is really portraiture.
Do you think that your chosen careers, your professions, influences in the way you shoot at all? I'm reminded of, I think it was Douglas Adams. In fact, I'm sure it was. I'm going to paraphrase this badly, but he said something along the lines of, in a given situation, a party or whatever, a comedian will, if given a chance, will come up with a really funny line instantly, whereas a writer will come up with a really funny response half an hour later. And you guys are both romantic comedy writers, and that's kind of what you guys do. Does your career, does it change how you think about photography? Are you planning ahead more in terms of what you're doing? Is it more structured, or is it a reaction to your work? Are you out there trying to react to the scenes that you're in?
That's interesting. I would say, you sort of think filmically. I mean, we both direct. Jeff's directed, more than I have, but you're thinking differently. I think that from the get-go, when you're a filmmaker, even as a writer, you are, writing scenes, and in your head, you're sort of, you know what you want them to look like. So I think with photography, when you go out there, you sort of have that thing automatically with you. So when you're framing something or shooting something, you're able to play with it from that, point of view. I think that's how I do it.
Yeah, I think for me, I've both written and directed in a variety of different modes. As a multi-camera writer and director, you're really making a stage play. And that is very much grounded in the words and the jokes and the lines and the banter and the dialogue and so forth. But at the very beginning of my career, and now like for the last 10 years, it's been primarily single camera stuff and other stuff. In other words, stuff that's shot more like a movie. Desperate Housewives in particular, a couple of the other single camera, Parenthood, that was another show that I worked on. And you really do think a lot more as a writer. You're visually you have a visual sense of the scene when you're directing on the page in a lot of cases. And I know, Claire, when we did our on film episode about Blow Up, I told you about how many shots I stole from Michelangelo Antonioni when I was directing one of my episodes of Desperate Housewives. I think a lot about visual design and how it dramatizes a character's emotional predicament. Thinking about the difference between the feeling of a closed room with lots of verticals and lots of bars versus the feeling of like sitting out poolside. We know that emotionally that evokes a different response. And it's a different way of portraying the character's inner life through her outer life. And so that kind of feeds into the writer's toolkit as you're thinking about the kinds of stories you're telling and the kinds of scenes you're working out. I hope that answered your question.
I think so. Certainly answers something. But I mean, have you been tempted to, or do you think you ever will in the future, bring these elements into the work that you're producing photographically, into your photography? Can you, given that you're used to working in an environment where you have control over all the aspects in terms of what you're bringing to it from the writing and the directing and everything else, and you've got experience in that, would you like to go, okay, I want to do this with pictures, I want to do this with still images, I want to create a scene, I want to create a story that is contained in this one thing? Because I mean, that's like, when you see photography at its best, that's ultimately what it is, the ultimate pinnacle of storytelling in one frame. Is this something you guys want to explore?
Well, I love that idea. I mean, I love trying to tell a story. I think that, the dream, like when you see these giant sets or these, beautiful photographs, that have been, worked on and staged and things have been built. I mean, that's amazing to me because they're sort of combining the filmmaking aspect into one still shot. A lot of, Vanity Fair and a lot of big magazines, do that where they're planning and, these giant, Annie Leibovitz shots or anything like that. You are creating a filmic feel for a still shoot. And that's
Go ahead.
Sorry,
go.
No.
I was going to say, you're making me think one of my favorite photographers is Gregory Crewdson. Do you guys know his? I mean, he creates these stage sets, often with, like, he had Julianne Moore featured in one of his photographs, where he tells an entire story inside one very dense frame. I mean, Claire, I assume you're a Cindy Sherman fan.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Yeah, and one thing that I love about. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, and I love Cindy Sherman, Alex Prager. Do you know her work? And
Courtney
Roy. They're all similar. Yeah.
Yeah, I like one of the things that's so great about Sherman's work, particularly that breakthrough work she did with Untitled Film Stills, was there was a story in this frame. Like, this woman in the frame with the wardrobe and the setting told an entire story. So, like, to get back to what you're saying, Graham, the project I wanted to do in 2020 was a thing that I was calling a paper movie. I really wanted to do a photo book that was images like that would tell a story, but it was kind of hamstrung by my inability to travel. And so that book
Mm.
never came to pass. But it's something I still hope to do as things open up, because I have an idea for something I want to do very much in that mode.
Definitely.
That sounds really interesting because, of course, creating a body of work that with a theme running through it for a book or for any other publication is very different from, you know, every shot being a hero shot. Because in a
Right.
body of work like that, you know, some shots that maybe wouldn't make it as standalone have become very, very important, you know, as establishing shots or as close-ups or, you know, stuff like that. So it's something that I've thought of and done, not to my satisfaction yet. I've tried it, but not really done it to my satisfaction. But I do try, and if I'm set myself maybe even something as normal as a home video, right, a vacation
Right.
video for the family, you know, I find myself going in and okay, right, so we're here, we're visiting whatever, right, today, yeah, where's my establishing shot, what's my close-up going to be, you know, stuff like that. And I try and think like that, but with photography, I very rarely discipline myself to think in terms of a body of work and getting those
Right.
extra shots as well. So
Right.
do you find it a challenge, or do you find it freeing, or is it just fun?
Look, to me, it's always fun. Like, always to
Yeah,
be
that's
able to
good. That's good answer.
use my camera. It's like such a, you know, and sometimes I will, you know, get film back or develop it and go, you know what, I could have done this, or I could have, you know, focused more on this. And sometimes there's so much to think about. And I think that helps also with our jobs is we have to think of 6,000 things happening at the same time. And so even though photography is a calming process, it's like when you can focus on just that, it's sort of the greatest thing ever. It's like just the greatest reward.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, Gabe and I have become accustomed over the arcs of our careers in television, and Gabe in the movies. When you want to make something, there is an enormous permission apparatus that you have to move through. In other words, you have to conceptualize it, but then you have to go get a producer to believe in it, and a studio to believe in it, and a network to believe in it, and get it funded, and build the sets, and hire department heads, and cast it. And it is an enormous pyramid of decisions and people and money. And there is something very freeing about being your own auteur, just to go out with your camera and make a work all by yourself with no permission required. It's really kind of exhilarating. And I think that's why photography is such an interesting counterweight to my day job. You know, even though it uses some of the same skill set, is there's no permission required. Anyone can go out and create. And I think that's, you know, it's just so different and liberating.
No one's giving us notes, which happens
Yes.
almost at every
Yes.
every phase. Even when you've shot it and there's something you've shot, they're gonna say, "Why couldn't you have done this?"
Yeah, do you
So,
know what? I couldn't imagine that. That's not a feature in my professional work.
oh
That I
boy.
can't imagine that every meeting I go to or every rehearsal of whatever you know, somebody would come back and go, "Yeah, here's my notes." I didn't ask you for any notes, no, but here's my
Oh yeah.
notes. It's just
And you also
like-
get here's the other thing. You also get notes from people who aren't experts sometimes. Sometimes there are people that have never held a camera or told a story in their lives, and they've just started the gig, and they're responsible for giving you notes. And so that part gets, you know, a little frustrating, I should say.
I can
Maybe
imagine, yeah.
not all studio executives are great. I can't believe that. I've heard
No,
nothing
I
but good
know.
things about them.
Some are great.
Some are amazing.
Some are great. Some are great. And usually the way you can tell if they're great is if their reference points extend beyond the movie they saw on Netflix 3 nights ago.
Yes.
You know, I always appreciate when a note is given by someone who has maybe seen a play or watched a black and white movie.
Yeah.
It makes me
Little
feel a little
things.
more
Little
confident.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, Gabe's right. You often find yourself kind of patiently listening to creative with a K thoughts from people who got the job because they worked for the person who worked for the person who worked for the person who was good.
That's it. Yeah. And is shooting film, particularly film photography, it gets you out of that, doesn't it? There's no redos, is there?
No, that's
Yeah.
it. That's it.
Yeah,
I think it's fun to just be able to shoot and know that's it. It's a
So,
great feeling.
well, Claire, you must have some of that as well. I mean, there's quite a lot of jeopardy in your work, isn't there?
Yeah, there is, but I was just listening to that. But I love the whole process, like you said, and from what Gabe was saying earlier, I start in here, and I love the whole thing of me thinking, okay, what outfits do I need? What props do I need? Where am I going to set it? If I'm going away, if I'm going on a holiday, or if I'm in an exhibition, I'll always bring my cameras, and then I'll do bits of research and might see where I'm staying, and then I'll build up a whole scene around that. And then I get going, and yeah, there is, but I keep going until I can get as best I can. And obviously, you do get disappointed in your shots, but I think for me, two things for me is I've said this before. My comfort zone is outdoors in bright sun, and that's why I really would love to get to California. Would be like a dream.
Yeah.
And of course, because of where I'm actually living and the COVID situation, I've had to think differently, and start thinking about how can I turn my lounge into a little set, and doing more with lights and stuff. So
Right.
yeah, but I guess, but I don't know. There's this thing about slowing down with film, but then again, there is that you can control so much, but there is almost sometimes that random quality that I really enjoy about film. And with Polaroid in particular, I love well, to me, they're magic anyway, and I'm kind of addicted to Polaroids.
Right.
But I do like the kind of perfect imperfections you can get, as well as how much you can control it. Sorry, Aid, I've probably completely digressed and not answered
No.
your question at all.
No, because as I'm listening to Jeff and to Gabe describing their processes and
Yeah.
the differences between the day job and the photography
Mhm.
hobby and things like that. I think you're telling the story because you work so hard, Claire, to tell a story with yours, and it's the whole process. And in my own way, much less disciplined, I do recognize that every time I plan to make a photograph, it actually turns out a bit different than when I just wander around pointing the camera at stuff, right? So there, I'm just horribly undisciplined, and I have this not attention for me, so that would be over egging it a bit, but for me there's two sides to it. One is that I have to be fairly precise and fairly responsible in my professional life, and so photography is the place where I just get to pot around and nobody holds me to account for anything, and I can do and I can start things and not finish them, and that's okay, right? Except that the problem I have there is then that I never manage to finish any photography stuff.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So
because Claire, the situation you were describing, like with your photography and the way you make stuff, is that you're coming up with the concepts, you're thinking about how you're going to set it out, how you're going to produce it, and then having to self-direct stuff. I mean, essentially, what you're doing is all the elements that Jeff and Gabe, you're having to do. I'd be interested from all of you, like as you went from the one thing to the other. So whether it's starting from writing or starting from the idea of these photos, and then having to actually learn other skills, learn how to produce stuff, learn how to direct others, does that create like a feedback loop, so then it then goes back round to the beginning next time when you go, okay, starting with the ideas of the writing phase, everything else that you learned on the previous one, does that all feed back so that you can kind of, I don't know, build a stronger structure next time because you know what's going above it is going to be like?
I think, well, yes. I mean, when I went from Will and Grace, which, as I said, was more like a stage play kind of show, to Desperate Housewives, it was a really interesting change for me because Mark Cherry, who was the creator of the show, and he encouraged us to think visually. And if you've watched Desperate Housewives, Desperate Housewives has a wraparound, which is a narrative device where Mary Alice, the dead character in the show who narrates the events of the series, walks us through the lives of these women and kind of sets up the episode. And Mark was really meticulous about getting us to think about visual motifs. Like, is there a hand pouring a glass of, is there a hand pouring a pitcher of water in every shot? Or is there yellow in every shot? Or is there a person packing a bag or putting on a dress or, or cooking or something? And so, or even the idea that there would be a left to right move. The camera would be panning left, right, or a character would walk across the frame. And it was like going back to film school for me. It was like a reminder you can tell the story through action. People don't have to say stuff all the time. And so going from Will and Grace, which was this incredibly like wordy show, to a show that often was told visually, changed my writing utterly. So the next time I sat down to write something, it was not a scene where 5 pages of dialogue happened. It was a scene where it was a page and a half of action and action kind of overlaying the words. Does that make sense?
That's really interesting, because what you've brought to mind there is some of those sequences in Edward Scissorhands. The husband's going out to play golf on a Saturday, and all the cars come off the driveways and drive through the suburb, all in formation and stuff like that. It's there's that. How do you write that? That's a really interesting. Sorry, my brain is just going spiraling off on a tangent.
That's actually a great reference for Desperate Housewives, because our show also took place in that sort of candy-colored suburbia. It was all pastel tones. Everything is beautiful all the time. Everyone is perfectly turned out all the time. And it was fun to play inside that kind of slightly fantastical world. And as I said, the scripts that I wrote of my own after Desperate Housewives bear no resemblance to the stuff I did before, because it's almost like I had been trained to like write in a different mode, use a different part of the brain.
And has that carried forward since then?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, the pilot that I wrote this past year was about a woman struggling with her mental health, and trying to depict that on screen can be very challenging. This may not be a good example, but like Sound of Metal. Have you seen that movie? So damn good. Have you seen it? It's a new movie. It's on Amazon Prime. It's about a heavy metal drummer who loses his hearing. And it is about how his life is changed by that. The story is told in this fascinating mix of visual motifs and sonic motifs. Yes, of course, he could talk about what it feels like to lose your hearing, but the way in which his world shifts, the way in which different lenses, different choices of focus points and stuff is used to create this sense of dislocation. It's exhilarating. And it's a reminder that we're making a visual medium, and that there's more than one way to unfold a story. It isn't just about characters talking about them. So just to go back to my own thing. So when I was writing this story about a woman who was struggling for her sanity, I was always looking for like ways to do it visually so she didn't have to talk about it, because talking about it could often sound didactic, wrong, too literal, and trying to show it. I mean, Claire, you do this to show the inner lives of the characters that you depict. You choose props and costumes and lighting and so forth. That's kind of what I was trying to do as well.
Yeah.
The other thing you touched on, Jeff, is using different parts of your brain. So we will often go from, I went from Freaks and Geeks, which was these mini movies about our lives, to Just Shoot Me, which was a sitcom and just, very fast and crazy and wild. So you're using a different part of the game. And then photography, to me, is that calming thing that it's just me. I'm doing what I want to do. And you're still using another part of your brain. So I think it's really interesting that you sort of move around with whatever project you're doing, because they're never exactly the same. We do drama and comedy, and it just goes back and forth.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, Gabe, about the fact that whenever you want to do something in your industry, you're always having to get permission. There's so many steps. You're always having to seek approval for stuff. Is it hard to stop that feeling with your photography? Do you find that when you're doing stuff, you're like, I want to get this out, I want people to see it and go, this is good, because that's how everything else in my life works. If people aren't looking at what I'm doing and going, this is good, then I'll get in trouble.
It's so interesting you say that. I think, look, you try to all the time. I mean, you like to get things out, I think, in photography, because it's what you really want to do. Television and film is a huge collaboration. It's always going to be a collaboration. It's very hard to have the power where you could just go, I'm going to shoot this with very few notes. And there are people like Judd Apatow is at that point where he will not, he'll listen to notes, but he doesn't have to take notes. He just does what he wants to do. And I think that that's the attraction, again, to photography. But you are sometimes thinking like, oh my gosh, is this the right, will people enjoy this? And I think you have to sort of snap out of that and go, this is what I want to shoot, and this is what I enjoy doing. And some people like it, some people won't. But you get over very quickly when you're doing television and film, because you have to remember when you're shooting a show and it's on the air. We did this, our last show was Night Shift, which was, I was in Albuquerque for 4 years shooting this series. And every time the show would air, the next morning you're getting calls from everyone about the ratings numbers. And it's not just, make the show you want and it goes out there and whatever happens, but there's the pressure of making it successful and getting those numbers. It's crazy. I mean, it's really crazy.
And
it's a weird thing.
And when you put something out, it extends beyond that permission apparatus we were talking about earlier of having to be beholden to notes from studio, network, actors, and so forth. It belongs to the world once it leaves your hands. I mean, I think I talked about this a little bit last time we spoke, but Friends, 25 years on, is something people care very intensely about. It does not belong to me anymore. It doesn't belong to the 12 of us that wrote that in a room. Freaks and Geeks is the same way. Freaks and Geeks is a show that people are intensely passionate about, that they intensely identified with those characters and they feel very connected to it. And there are choices that we made on Friends or on Will and Grace I don't love so much these days. Things that feel terribly dated, and I kind of cringe a little bit. But it's out there. It belongs to everyone now.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting study in contrast, because imagine you took a photograph when you were in 9th grade that became the most popular photograph in the world, and it's all anyone was talking about 25 years later. It's unimaginable.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like for me to go back and look at the work I did on Friends. Same thing Gabe was talking about. None of those actors had big careers. Courtney Cox was primarily known for dancing with Bruce Springsteen in a video. And all of a sudden it is a totemic, pop culture phenomenon that people buy the Lego set. Oh my God. If you had told us, the 12 of us in the room, that there would be a Lego set of the character, come on.
That is definitely a measure of success, I have to say. If somebody makes they make a Lego set.
Exactly. When it becomes Lego, when anything you do becomes Lego,
that's huge.
So photography, in a lot of ways, yes, we love to put images out there and get a few likes on Instagram and love for people to approve of them. But the risk is so minimal and it's so personal, and failure is so petite. It's okay to fail. No one has to know but me that it didn't work out. Whereas, and I have had some high profile failures. The high profile failures are spectacle and they're disgust. And they have a giganticness that it's a very interesting contrast.
Does that impact your creativity though, both of you? Like you're saying, if whatever you consider is a failure or the ratings, does that pressure? It must affect your creativity, I would imagine.
As you get on, Ed, you've done it for a long time. You're basically going into a room and selling them a show with the attitude of, this is what I'm going to make. This is the show. You're showing that confidence and passion for what you want to do. Because in the very beginning, when we got notes for the first time that wasn't Freaks and Geeks, and you got notes, you were like, okay, do that. And then you went home, I did the notes, and you go back and you're forgetting that they may not even remember what notes they gave you because they're doing 25 other shows that they're giving notes on. And so you sort of, you want to please. It's all about how do we make it better? We want them to work with us again. And then you get over that and you sort of say, I'll listen to the notes, in your head. You go, oh, I'll look at that, because there'll be a ton of notes that are bad, and then there'll be some that are good and really helpful. So you sort of you get into that world where it makes you a little crazy.
It can be tricky sometimes when a show becomes really successful. And as tricky as it is when things fail, it can be sometimes more tricky where you start to get massive validation for certain types of choices. And sometimes the audience just wants you to repeat yourself and they don't want things to change. You know, when I had run Will and Grace with the two guys who created it for 4 years and they left, and in season 5, we had some discussions early on in the writer's room. And I said, I think Grace should get married. And everyone wigged out because how was the show going to be Will and Grace if she married some other man? And when we did it, I think it was a great decision. We did it in our 100th episode. And some people liked it because it was Harry Connick, and some people didn't because we weren't doing the same things we had done in seasons 1, 2, 3, and 4. But you have to grow. You know, if you allow yourself to be at the mercy of what 17 million people want from you, I'm sure we could all cite examples of shows we've loved where you feel like at a certain point it becomes fan service.
Right.
That they're doing the show that the fans want to see, as opposed to what those 12 people in a room want to make and what's personal and relevant to them. And it's really a balancing act because you don't want to give the middle finger to your audience either.
Right.
So it's a, you know, sensing what they like, but really knowing how to live by your own lights. It's a very interesting.
That's a real challenge. You've just reminded me of long time ago, but Moonlighting.
Yeah.
The ramp up of the relationship between Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd in Moonlighting was just astonishing. And I was probably too young to be watching it, to be fair, but just like, it was a long time ago, wasn't it? But, you know, it was just an amazing thing to write. But how do you do that? How does such a finely judged? And I think they got away with it. I think they did it well in that particular show. But there are others. I mean, you know, we get the phrase "jumped the shark" from a TV program, don't we? You know, so there's definitely probably more of those than there are of ones that successfully make that transition, I guess.
And I think there's also a time you develop elephant skin. I mean, you are, I mean, people really, you have to know you're going to be criticized at all times about what you're doing. And when it's something that's a real story and personal, like Freaks and Geeks was all our real stories. So the pain that came when the network would say, when is the geek making out with the cheerleader? And you just go, well, that wasn't our experience. You just sort of have to, you know, swallow a lot and go, okay. But that's the thing where you sort of develop this resistance to so much criticism because you're getting it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we hear a lot about, you know, in some ways TV being the new movies these days, and some of these, you know, amazing productions. We could all pick a list of half a dozen of our favorites, and we'd all pick different things, right? There's that much good stuff out there right now.
Right.
That, you know, that is, is that sort of formulaic approach, I guess, is slightly easier to break out of in TV these days. But conversely, right, if Gregory Crewdson started doing candid photography, would anybody want to see that?
No, you have a point. I mean,
has he painted himself into a corner somewhat? I don't know.
I suppose this goes for work, though, doesn't it? I mean, Claire, when you're doing your photography, do you ever think, oh, I want to take some pictures, or maybe there are pictures that you have taken which are just nothing like your normal stuff? Maybe they're landscape pictures or something like that. You think, I won't share this because this isn't what my feed is. This isn't what the people who follow me want to see. So I won't share this, even though that's what I want to do. Do you ever find yourself in that situation?
Not really. I mean, I do take other pictures. I do now and again put the odd landscape scene in. Not many. I think for me, I find sometimes, I think Instagram's I like Instagram as a platform. I like to see other people's work. I think sometimes for me, I can get hooked into that. Oh, you know, you got to have X amount of followers and all that.
Right.
And I think it's really, for me, I feel like it's really important for me to try not to get too sidetracked by what other people are doing and get into that. Well, maybe if I started to do this, I might get more followers, but keep doing what you want to really do. I think that's important for me. But what I do want to do more, which is where my photography interest began, which was I began documenting some of the local characters in my hometown because I found them just generally very interesting and quite fascinating. There was quite a lot of, quite eccentric individuals that sort of intrigued me. And I did take a lot of pictures, which I've still got, but unfortunately, if you look at them now, the composition's all dreadful. But I feel like I want to, as well as carrying on with my kind of characters and self-portraits as well, do more of those sorts of shots as well.
Right.
And there's one woman that I've got my eye on, and she was an ex-nun, and she's in her 70s, and she's got this really long grey hair, and she's a character. But every time I've ever seen her, last time I saw her, she was waiting at a bus stop, and I turned my car around. I thought, I'm going to go and see and ask her if I can take a photo. And the bus came, and she'd got on and gone. So I'm just kind of hoping that I'll like see her again. Yeah. Sorry.
Nice. Yeah, be brave, Claire. Be brave. Go do it, because
Stop the bus.
Go and
not
stop
that brave, yeah.
I know.
Like splat on the front of a bus. No, I wasn't saying jump in front of the bus, Claire. No. What I meant was like feel free to go and take different types of photographs. Because I mean, this is one of the reasons I don't do Instagram. In fact, actually, most of my photography I do for my own benefit, not for others' benefit.
Right.
And that's not because I'm afraid to show it. I'll show it to anybody who's happy to look at it, to be honest. But I'm not. I don't post it on social media and stuff like that. I've never been a great one for social media. I prefer to broadcast at the internet, rather than to receive anything.
Right.
Broadcasting is great for that. It's
so much easier.
No, carry on, dude.
No, I was just going to say, just to Claire, go for it. And Instagram doesn't have to. If you're worried about it, Instagram doesn't have to be the vehicle. In fact, you don't even need a vehicle, right? Or if you want to, there'll be other ways. There'll be other channels. We live in a world where there are many, many, many channels available to us. Although all of them are fairly virtual at the moment. But I'd say go for it and see if you enjoy it and learn from it. I mean, last week we were talking to a man who spent all winter in a shed painting collodion slides. It's it's experimentation. You can do more with it. I mean, I'm in the mid-experiment right now, and if you want to worry about whether people want to give you notes or see your work on anything, I'm hosting a film photography podcast this evening, and I sold almost all my film cameras last year. Right, so. It's and the few I've retained, the only one I use really is a little Instax camera. So although I am printing a lot, I'm taking more photos than I've taken in years, and I'm printing tons of them as well, just on a little 6x4 dye sub printer, a Canon selfie dye sub printer, and they're all over the place. In fact, pretty much everywhere I look, I can see a ton of photographs right now. So things are cyclical as well. Things have patterns. So don't feel that you're stuck. I'd look at your other photographs.
It's one of the things that's doing the rounds at the moment, which kind of ties in a couple of things that have come up with this idea of that people are looking for things that are more, looking to analog stuff, looking to things that to take them back more, like you were saying, like the typewriters and stuff like that, and also people trying different stuff, jarringly different stuff. And actually, in this case, it's coming from like a quarter you just wouldn't expect it to come from. It is the first couple of episodes of the new Marvel series, WandaVision. Because you watch that and go, this is very different. I mean, they're making a 50s show, a like properly 50s show. And especially in those first couple of episodes, they played it pretty straight. There wasn't a lot of, and it's been a bit... I've been a bit disappointed as more and more of the Marvel has kind of crept in, but but the fact that they clearly felt that there would be enough interest and people would be on board enough with that. It says something about kind of, I don't know, where they think people's desires. The last couple of shows were just mad 50s in the way they were done in like a real wholehearted way. It was impressive. Like that must be quite a leap in your industry. Did you look at that and go, huh, bold choice, or did you just think, well, it's Marvel?
There's a lot of that in our industry.
Yeah, I've that's one of the first TV programs I've been, actually trying to keep up with. Normally, I just wait until they run through and then catch them up afterwards if I want to. But we've been watching WandaVision, and it's it's a really interesting one. I hope they keep challenging us as much as they did when they started out. I hope it doesn't become another standard Marvel thing, because I think that'd be a really wasted opportunity, because they've set up something that they could do something different, and I'm sure they got bags of listeners, watchers. What do they call those people? Viewers. That's what they're called, aren't they? Viewers.
I'm torn when something like that comes along, because I think it's a very interesting.
The banana came up.
I like it. There it goes. I'm always torn when, I think WandaVision is a very interesting show, and it's very it's exciting to see that sort of experimentation and that way of telling a story within kind of the Marvel rubric. I think Mandalorian is a really interesting take on a Western, going back to like what Star Wars was to begin with. Very interesting take on a Western inside the Star Wars universe. That's great. I get a little tetchy sometimes, because I wish you could do that kind of experimentation without it having to be branded.
If we could, definitely.
One of the things that was so exciting to me about a movie like Knives Out, Rian Johnson's movie that he made after Star Wars, is it wasn't based on a novel. It wasn't based on a character that already existed. It wasn't an Agatha Christie, it was just a brand new conception with a new ensemble of characters. And that to me is like the really exciting thing, is when something kind of bursts out. Remember the movie A Quiet Place a couple of years ago? So exciting. Like a great genre film with a terrific premise that's based on nothing. That's just like a whole, and now of course there's a sequel, which is I think a year behind its release date, because they want people to see it in theaters, because it's a movie that's about sound.
Right.
So I'm always go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
So I was going to say, your take there on Knives Out is really interesting, because that's not what I got from it at all. So I thought it was fantastic. I loved every minute of it. It was just a joy to watch. The lighting, the lenses, the story was, and all it give. But for me, it was okay. It was definitely something. It was a new look at a very standard Agatha Christie style whodunit, and they had James Bond in it as well. So for me it didn't seem to be a good. I read it as sort of a safe bet, right? So they'd mitigated the risk of doing something slightly unusual in today's market by making sure that they had a hot lead actor and a great director who just come off something really big and stuff like that. So I it's interesting you thought that was perhaps a risky and out there thing, because I thought that was a great but relatively safe bet.
I feel if you had called that movie Perry Mason, it would have been a much easier movie to sell.
Right.
It's it's a cultural thing then, because in the UK we have a long history of TV series that based around Agatha Christie characters like Miss Marple and Hercule Poirot and others.
Yeah, and I think I agree. To me, that was an interesting take on the Hercule Poirot kind of story, but I just love that it wasn't branded. You're right. It is very much in the Agatha Christie mode. It's just, it wasn't based on a comic book. It wasn't based on a novel. I get very excited when I see new conceptions that aren't beholden to a franchise.
Right.
Because we're in a very franchise-oriented culture. And
Especially
Gabe and I
now.
both know, we're in the business of going out and trying to sell shows. It is almost impossible to go out and sell a TV show based on a wholly original conception. You need even if it's just, I found this New Yorker article that is about a woman who was in 2 marriages. Right. You need that New Yorker article. You can't just go out and say, I want to do a show about a woman in 2 marriages. They always need that safety net. And I'm not quite sure why. I think it's ass covering, to be honest. But it's so much easier to go out with something that is based on something else, that comes from a superhero place or a comic book place, or it's based on a
hit show in the 80s.
Yeah, based on a hit show in the 80s. I'm always amazed when they remake shows that nobody has heard of.
They're continuing to do it now. Yeah.
They had, I don't know if you guys watched the Super Bowl. This may not even be the right reference, but there was a long introductory montage to the Super Bowl that featured a digital recreation of Vince Lombardi, the great coach of the Green Bay Packers from the 1950s and 60s. I'm watching this thinking nobody alive knows who Vince Lombardi is.
No, absolutely.
And so this reference was utterly lost on people, but somehow that was better than just having a sort of an actor play a coach.
Right.
That's maybe not the best analogy. In the
No,
world.
no,
Gabe knows what I'm talking about.
Yep, I do.
these things are all interesting. It's really because it is. I think from a complete outsider's view, my limited understanding of the TV and the movie business is that it is a fairly risk-averse business. I'd like to see more unusual, unique independent movies in theaters and what have you. That sounds a bit like a bit more fun. And if there's a bit of sophistication, well, let's let Daniel Craig just have a laugh with it, because what was the one he did? The other one he did, the heist movie. He played another character with I can't remember what it was. They were robbing a.
Did he do a dreadful
horse
Southern
racing
accent in that one too?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And almost he sat almost unintelligible, a bit like Brad Pitt in Snatch.
Yeah.
But he was fantastic. He was fantastic in it, and
He's
you could
always
tell he was
great.
just having the time of his life. He's like, I don't have to be James Bond. I can actually move my facial
Right.
muscles and stuff like
So
we
true.
do see. You do see, talking about the risk aversion now. I mean, you do see that within photography as well, especially I think for not professional shooters as such. Well, actually, no. I think even with that, in professional, in wedding, whatever, there's an echo chamber. You see a lot of the same stuff and the same style of stuff coming up over and over, because people go, okay, that's what a good photo looks like. So I should be trying to make a good photo that looks like that, because then everybody else who's making photos that look like that will go, I like your photo because it looks like the photos I like to take. And it's this extra. And so, I mean, that's why it's so refreshing when you come across work and go, oh, that doesn't look like anything that I'm used to seeing. Like your work, Claire, for example, like you can be scrolling through Instagram and seeing lots of very pretty stuff. There's a landscape, there's a city, and then you'll hit your work and go, that looks different from everything else that I'm seeing here. Or someone like Simon's work, who we spoke to last week, and you go, that looks nothing like anything that I'm seeing here. And it stops you and it makes you think about actually what the work is and about what photography can be, which is anything, which is absolutely anything. But most of the time it's the same fairly limited palette of things.
Right.
It's hard to break out of that.
True. Yep.
Do you both think a show like Twin Peaks, the first ever season, would that be unlikely to get made today? Or
They tried it.
what do you mean
They were going to remake it.
They tried to do a remake,
Yeah.
and it was I don't think it was long-lived. But yeah, people, trust me, someone will bring that up again in a pitch. They want something that was successful at one time, as it's easier for an executive to sell it and go, this is what they want to make. It's perfect. It's been done before.
Yeah.
We'll just cast it with this person, and it'll be a great new show. And that's what's happening. Every month you're reading about a show from the 80s or the 70s that's being remade, or a movie that's being, and also sometimes you pitch a project like years ago, and we wanted to do when Silence of the Lambs came out, we were going, oh, we got to do a Clarice, and now a Clarice thing has come out years and years later. And so this continues to happen because it's safer for them to go out, because they're competing with Netflix and all the streamers, and as you can see, their ratings are going lower and lower and lower.
I think the executive that greenlit Twin Peaks at ABC back in the, are we talking late 80s or early 90s when that came out?
Early 90s, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, that gentleman or lady deserves an enormous amount of credit, because I mean, I guess it kind of flew on the strength of the name David Lynch, but think about it. That was a 3-network universe. There was I don't think Fox even existed at the time that show came along. So that was made for ABC. You know, at the time, it was roughly contemporaneous aid with Moonlighting, 30 something. You know, this was a network that had a particular brand in 1 hour drama. And to do a show that was that much of a departure, that's courage. And it's a show exceedingly weird where you don't solve the principal mystery. Nobody behaves like a recognizable human being. There's no big stars in it. You know, nobody knew who Kyle MacLachlan was. You know, no.
Did they not? I knew who he was. He was that bloke from Dune, wasn't he?
Oh, from Dune, right?
Was it before Dune or after?
No, Dune was,
I think it was after.
no, it was after. I
Was
think,
it
wasn't
after? Okay.
It was.
But
I
even
think
so,
so
not like-
because
Yeah.
And there was giants and everything in it. And I was
Yeah,
just wondering
everything
like,
was peculiar.
if he
You know,
came
there-
to that show now, would it be likely to wouldn't get anywhere?
Well, weirdly, I think just because of what Gabe just said,
Yeah.
if you could find someone to believe in it, then yes. I mean, it is such a fragmented universe now. You know, I said on Twitter a couple of years ago, I guarantee you that when the Emmy nominations come out, there will be a show from a network that you're sure was a weather app. You know, like there are so many micro streamers and strange networks with names like Crackle and Pop, you know, that like you've never heard of, making great shows. Schitt's Creek started as a show on Pop TV, a network no one had ever heard of. It had a microscopic viewership, one of the great comedies of the last 10 years. So it was quirky and strange and idiosyncratic. And I don't know if you could call Eugene Levy and Catherine O'Hara big stars at the time that was made, but it was a quirky, strange, singular vision. And it is weirdly kind of easier to get those things made now because you don't have to reach an audience of 25 million like we did on Friends.
Or even if it's based on another format. You know, formats are such a big thing where you take a show from another country or you make a deal with another country and you just this is the American version of it.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I did that once. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, but I created a show. The first show I ever created was then I made a deal with Tiger Aspect in your neck of the woods called Street Mate. And Street Mate was on, which was this, you know, silly documentary I was doing about dating on the streets, and Davina McCall hosted it. And it was one of these things that just happened the other way. Usually it's always coming over here. It's a show adapted from England or Europe or somewhere. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, I tell you what, I'd like to. So one of the things that's been the most joyous TV programs for me from here in recent years is a show called Detectorists, which is a wonderful sitcom. It's very very slow and relaxing and laid back, but so the stories are just amazing. Some of the photography in it is very good, even though it's really just a sitcom. If you get the for those of you who haven't, for those of you out there listening that haven't watched Detectorists,
I gotta see
watch it. It is awesome. I mean, many people will recognize Mackenzie Crook. I mean, he was
sure
from the
Office.
and the pirate movies as well. Toby Jones
he co-created it, I think, didn't he? Did Mackenzie Crook help create the show as well as star in it? Am I right about that?
The Office, possibly. I think it was a fairly small thing when it started out.
Okay.
It was Ricky Gervais and it was the guy who writes with Stephen.
Oh no, I'm talking about Detectorists. Didn't Mackenzie Crook help create that?
Oh,
show?
sorry. Oh, yes. Sorry. Yes. Very, very much so. Yes. And Toby Jones. I don't know if Toby Jones is a household name around the world, but he's a very recognized actor in this country. And funny enough, his dad was in Dune, actually. So there you go.
Oh, wow.
Close the circle. His dad was Mr. Jones, and
Mr. Jones.
There you go.
And he played was he? I can't remember. He's the guy that pulled people's heart plugs out. It flew around in a chair in June. What was that character
Baron
called?
Harkonnen.
Baron Harkonnen. Thank you, Baron Harkonnen.
Wow.
Well done.
Yes,
I've listened to the book recently.
Oh, have you? Okay, yeah. Well, so that was Toby Jones's dad, as I understand it.
My obsession right now is a UK show called Stath Lets Flats. Have you guys seen this show?
I've never heard of it.
I love that I'm telling 3 Brits to watch a British show they've never heard of. It stars Jamie Demetriou, who played the rodent in season 1 of Fleabag. You know, did you watch?
Yeah.
Remember with the teeth?
Yep.
Yeah. And it is amazing. It's my favorite show. It won the BAFTA for comedy this year. It beat out Fleabag, as a matter of fact. Stathlets Flats.
Stuff.
It's on HBO Max in the US. Really, really
right.
good.
Gotta watch that.
My
Yeah.
favorite thing.
Is it even on in the UK?
I think it is.
That would
I'm
be
pretty sure it
deeply
is.
ironic.
Really
That
great
would be
show.
deeply right. I'm
A
I'm
sitcom
looking.
about an estate agent.
Yes.
I just want to
Really?
say
There it is. There it is.
There
Thank
it
you,
is.
John Whitmore.
It's been
There's
a
the
tough
title.
year, hasn't it? Yeah, sitcom about an estate agent.
You say thank you, John Whitmore, but I was watching the video feed that's on John's screen, and it looked as it was frozen for a while. And Jeff, you were frozen in mid-gape, so save your thanks. You know.
there
Oh,
goes
no, I've
the
been
banana.
bananaed.
So good.
Guys, I know we need to sort of start thinking about wrapping things up now, and I wanted to regrettably drag things slightly back, kicking and screaming towards photographers and photographers.
Yeah, I was going to say we should probably start recording the photography part of this
Yeah,
podcast
probably.
soon, shouldn't we?
What I wanted to ask you guys about, and I don't think you've talked about this on the show yet, although I'm sure you will do at some point anyway. But preempting that and ruining it, therefore, obviously the photography you love and the collecting of the cameras is something that you both love, and you've talked at length about the thrill of the hunt, the joy of going to find these cameras, and it's something you're both still actively engaged in. Jeff, you just recently got your wide lux. I think it must make you the most famous Jeff with a wide lux in TV.
I mean, I've
right?
right.
The only one.
He is the most famous Jeff with a wide lux in his house. Yes.
In the world.
Well, one of the most famous Jeffs in his
Yes.
house with a wide.
I'm in the top 2.
Yes.
What I wanted to ask you was, given that you've both been doing this for a while now, and it sounds to me like I mean, there are a lot of cameras out there, but you've both got a lot of cameras that you love that are meaningful to you. Are you worried? It maybe isn't the right word, but this high that you get from going on the hunt, the things that you're going to want to hunt for, that is an ever diminishing collection of stuff.
La 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 la.
I mean, especially for you, Gabe. Sadly, especially for you, because you really like, as you're saying earlier, like really good functional stuff. Whereas Jeff, you're prepared to buy crap as long as it's pretty crap. Which is, I'm with you there. I'm 100% with you. But is this a thing that concerns you? And have you thought about where you'll look for that next high? Where when cameras and hunting for cameras is no longer such a viable means of that constant drip of whatever the endorphins, where is it going to take you next?
It's never going to stop. It's never going to stop. And this is the thing. So I'm usually on location a lot in strange places, and I will find myself, as soon as I get there, finding every antique and thrift shop there is. So in Albuquerque, I had it down. And every day or every few days, there'd be a new something that came that would be in the store. So it would be, what kind of camera am I going to find today? And sometimes I wouldn't find any cameras. But that desire to hunt and see something and see a different kind of camera, shooting it, seeing what that camera does that I don't know about, is really fascinating to me. And I just don't sadly see it ending.
There's a finite number of there's a finite number of different cameras at some point.
I will once again. La 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 la. La.
It is funny because Gabe and I are already talking about like trading, like lending each other just so we can experience each other's gear. I think for me, I mean, obviously the thrill of the hunt is part. I mean, I feel like I remember when I was collecting vinyl records, like the exciting thing was going to a record store and you'd get dirt on the end of your fingers from like flipping through like hundreds and hundreds of albums. That is over. If you want a particular record, you go to discogs.com or you go to eBay and you just buy it. I think that the difference for me in camera collecting, this maybe goes back to something I said a little while ago, but each camera, it is a beautiful object. It is an exciting thing to hunt and ultimately capture. But there's also the way in which different tools unlock. Oh, I love it. What is that? Wait, what was that?
This is a pixie gnome, which is a weird,
Oh,
or a
God,
gnome
that's
pixie.
great.
I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean, talk about box camera. That's the most literally a box
That
camera.
is
like,
a
That's a
box.
box.
That's
I love
fantastic.
it.
So I think it is about like the acquisition, right? And yes, we talk about that a lot on the show, is the acquisition. But I think there is also the way in which these different tools unlock different parts of you as an artist. You know, I remember the first time I got a Pentax 6x7, which in a lot of ways is a completely ridiculous camera. It's enormous and ungainly. It's hard to, it's heavy, whatever. But the images that I got out of it were totally different than anything I was getting out of any other camera. And I don't know exactly why. And I mean, obviously the wide lux is a different frame. It's a different type, shape of image. It's distorted. There's lots of things in that camera that are automatically different. I've talked about how Gabe is constantly mocking my love of miniature and sub-miniature cameras like the Minox. The Minox, as bizarre as it is as a machine, the kinds of images you get out of a Minox are totally different than from any other camera. So I'm interested in that synergy between artist and tool. You know, the way in which it brings something out of you. And I don't know exactly why. You know, we all talk about how analog photography slows you down. I think that's part of it. But part of it is just even the size of the focus ring, or where the shutter speed is located, or how you meter with it, or what the finder looks like, or how it feels in the hand. These are all things that influence the way you're going to shoot with it. The way you shoot looking down into the Rolleiflex square viewfinder is totally different than the way you look, you know, the way you focus if you're looking through a conventional SLR.
Right.
So that kind of thing really interests me. And then of course the other thing is I started processing my own stuff after a long layoff in the last year or two. And now I've started to do color processing. And that's a whole different phase of it, is when you start to understand like that part of the image making. So I similarly do not think I'm going to get bored anytime soon, even when I've bought the next camera.
I love the denial that you're both living in.
What do you say?
The camera is never gonna. Although
Never
Jeff,
gonna-
you
nah,
you
nah,
at
nah,
least
nah.
seem to be having like a side eye towards. There might be other fixations that I can go into in the future. I've got 50 enlargers now, and
yeah. Oh, I was thinking
boy.
idly today. I was on my way actually to Freestyle Photo to buy a C41 kit. That's our local retailer. And I started thinking, I think about you and your dark shed. I started thinking, do I need, and I had a Durst F30 enlarger when I was a kid. That was the one I learned on, and they're very inexpensive on eBay. And I started thinking, is it the time? Gabe, you have a setup right behind you.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you know what that setup is?
What is that?
That besides on the other side, I'm sorry, it's a Durst, the same enlarger that's converted into a stand to take to scan with my SLR.
Oh,
It's a 30. It's so
that.
funny. But yeah, I look, I also, you know, printing is such an amazing thing. And there's so many photographers that I've had these talks with, and I'll have my digital camera. Years ago, I was in New York, and this photographer, she said to me, goes, yeah, but come over here. And she opens a drawer, hands me a print. You know, there's a print, like you can feel it. Your pictures, you've got thousands of pictures on a hard drive. And I really love the process of printing, and I'm trying to figure out how to convert a tiny bathroom and putting an enlarger in there. So I love that whole idea. It'd be so much fun.
Brilliant. I think John should. I don't know whether John can do this. John, by the way, John, sterling work throughout
Unreal.
this show. It's been. Oh, there we are.
There he is.
Hey, John.
Hello,
John, you know, Gabe was just asking, you know, is it the right time to set up a darkroom? I mean, it's always the right time, right?
Yeah, it's always the right time. Get on it. Don't delay.
I'm on it.
And there he's gone.
Hey, one more thing. Right. There he is.
And I think John would agree that also once you start digging into that side of things, that can become every bit as obsessional as collecting cameras. So that could be perfect for you guys as your bags and your cameras.
If you like spending money, don't delay.
Give us more things to be addicted to. Perfect.
Yeah. You both need it. Both clearly. Bye, John, again. Hey, I'm going to hand over to you to wrap this up.
What, to explain the last 3 or 4 minutes where we've just been doing visual.
It's great. Yeah, sorry, listeners.
Yes. So for the benefit of the listeners, some stuff. Right, anyway, some visual stuff. Go watch it on YouTube. What's the YouTube channel called, Graham?
It's Sunny 16 Podcast. It's just
Sunny
go on
16
YouTube and find
Podcast.
Sunny 16
I like
Podcast.
that name. I like that name. Yeah.
I think we'll stick with it.
It's catchy.
Any minute now, we'll get round to a line of merch too.
Do you reckon we've still got on the Google Drive the original list of potential names for Sunny 16?
You know, I think I somehow, after you managed to murder brutally all of our early documents, I think I managed to pull that one back somehow. I think I did manage to. Yeah.
In a Google Drive move, I killed about the first 50 shows worth of show notes, didn't I?
Yeah, you
Something like that. Yeah.
Some
years back. Yes, that was not my finest moment.
Well, I mean,
yes, that'd be interesting. So, what? Anyway, sorry, what? What, you were handing over to me to do something, and I got momentarily distracted because of all the visual gags I had to try and explain.
Seamlessly wrap it up, Abe, which I think you're already well on the way to doing.
Right. How does that go again? Do you know, after my extended break from the podcast, actually, last week, I was absolutely quite overtaken with emotion when I said, "Hi, welcome to the Sunny 16 podcast" at the end. At the beginning, sorry, and then the end, I just fluffed it as usual, like I'm going to do now. So,
but no, this week you're definitely going to nail it. I feel really good. I remember when we started off doing this, you always nailed the ending of the show. I think you ever fluffed it, and I have every confidence you're going to knock it out the park this time.
Maybe I'm just getting stage fright now. We have so many listeners, right? Do you know what? I can remember how to start the end of the show, which is to say a big thank you to our guests, of course. So, Gabe, thank you very much. Have you enjoyed yourself?
Happy to be here. We will be here anytime. We love your show.
Excellent. It's great to meet you. And Jeff, have you enjoyed yourself?
It's been a delight and an honor. Thank you.
Excellent. That's very good to hear. And Claire and Graham, have you enjoyed yourselves?
Very much, thank you. And I dream of cameras. I really do love your podcast.
Thanks, y'all.
I feel like I learn from it, and I love your accent, so I love listening to it. It's a really good podcast, so I shall be tuning in for episode 5.
Excellent.
This week, is it, Graham?
Yes, it certainly is. It'll be at the end of this week. And I love that, again, in this episode, I feel like there ought to be a drinking game because, again, this week we might somehow bring moonlighting and David Lynch into the podcast.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem
I know you don't.
I didn't once mention the soft focus on Sybil Shepherd. Not once.
No.
Well, I mean, once now you did.
Oh, no, I didn't. I think you're mistaken.
I love that John brought that graphic up so quickly. I think he just assumed at some point you were going to mention Moonlight.
It's in our stock library, isn't it? It's one of our stock photos now, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Actually, that reminds me, there is somebody else we should say thank you to, and that is to John, who is.
Oh yes.
Very cool work. We love
it. Very cool work on the live visuals, John. Thank you very much.
You've been brilliant, John. I think my favorite bit
was your little Polaroid again.
I'll stay in now. I might as well. The hard work's over, isn't it?
Yeah.
My favorite bit, John, was where we could all watch you Googling stuff. I like that video.
I made one mistake in the whole show. I'm just glad it was like a search result for the detectorists and not anything else.
That probably makes you our man of the match then, actually. If you only made the one mistake, I'm pretty sure I made quite a few. Okay, well, do you know what, folks? We have been the Sunny 16 podcast, and as always, it has been an honor and a privilege to talk with you all. We will play you out now with Rachel's band Rocket, and you can find their album Promises I Should Have Kept on Bandcamp and Spotify and Amazon and other places that I struggle to remember. YouTube.
Go to. Right, here's a pro tip, everybody. I think the YouTube channel is Weatherman, which is a recording artist that Rachel's worked with. I think it's. I'll find a link and put it in the show notes. Anyway, on his YouTube channel, he's got loads of his old videos of music that he's worked on, including loads of the stuff Rachel's done. So you can see Rachel in rock and roll days, strutting that stuff.
So
It's
cool.
good. It's a good time.
That sounds good. And of course, as Sunny 16, we are on the webs as well. So sunny16podcast.com is always a good place to start, as is the podcast feed, of course. Hopefully you're all subscribed if you're listening to this. If not, then please do subscribe. And Sunny 16 podcast on YouTube now to watch John's masterful work, John.
Excellent.
I'm loving the whole aesthetic we've got going on here. For those of you that can't see it or haven't seen it yet, we're all in our own little Polaroids. We're on a nice wooden bench, and
with original Polaroid frames supplied by Claire. Thank you very much.
Oh, of course,
Nice. Beautiful.
Yes.
Artisanal.
No takedown requests here.
Yeah, and it's important. We should also, I know we mentioned at the beginning of the show, but just to say, if you want to hear Jeff and Gabe's show, which you really should, anybody who loves cameras and just loves chat about it, you have to listen. So make sure you subscribe to the Sunny 16 Presents feed, because there is a new episode going out every other week, and it's fantastic. Really good one.
Thank you, guys.
Absolutely. Right. And on that note, only one more thing to say, which is goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye.